It is Wednesday on Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Glad to be back with you for another day and a good show coming up today. Kent Youngblood from the Star Tribune joins me here in just a little bit. Kent covers women's basketball primarily at the Star Tribune, including the Gophers and the Lynx, and a big one tonight for the Lynx. A game that, frankly, I'm surprised they are in on multiple levels. I mean, this is a team that started the year 0-6, thought that maybe they were going to be playing more for a draft pick than the postseason, but they go 19-13 in their next 32, show that they're, one of the better teams in the WNBA, probably not one of the best teams, but certainly one of the better teams in the league. Then they lose 2 at the end of the regular season. They'd already clinched a playoff spot, but they lose 2, miss out on a chance for a better seed, have to play Connecticut. Cheryl Reeves upset, not saying they're not listening to the game plans, things like that. They get blown out in game 1 of that 3-game series in Connecticut. You're thinking, okay, bags are packed for vacation time, and instead they win game 2, force this game 3, which is strangely back at Target Center. I don't understand the WNBA postseason format. It seems like, yes, it gives the better seed a chance to close things out with the first 2 games, but man, that is pretty punitive to have to go and travel to the lower seed for the clinching game of the series. I don't quite understand that format. I think you should just play all 3 at the site of the higher seeded teams, kind of like baseball is doing it now with their best of 3 wild card round. But hey, that's just me. It works to the Lynx' benefit, even though they've not been a great home team this year. Their deciding game 3 is tonight, and Kent Youngblood and I will talk about that here in just a few minutes. Got some Vikings stuff towards the end of the show, just some kind of mulling over that I've been doing of kind of where they might go from here based on the outcome of what happens in Sunday's game against the Chargers. I'll get to that here in just a little bit as well. First, though, what did I miss? Twins win 7-0. That's the good news. Lead in the American League Central swells to 8 with just 10 to play. So that postseason spot getting much closer to being a lock instead of just a extreme likelihood. Willie Castro with a huge game in this one. Had a home run, made 2 big catches, including a sliding catch to save a couple runs and a home run rob and grab as well. So big game for Willie Castro, big game for Kenta Maeda, which I want to get to in a minute. But the more sobering news, Royce Lewis has to leave the game late with what they're calling hamstring tightness. Maybe not the worst thing in the world at this point. He's got 2 weeks pretty much until the playoffs start. Don't really need him in there right now to win games, but you need him in the playoffs. You need him in the postseason. This can't be something where he's going to be out for that. He's been your best player, your most important player for the second half of the season, without a doubt, at least as a hitter. Here was acting manager Jace Tingler after the game. Rocco Baldelli still out on paternity leave after the birth of his twins the other day. But here was Jace Tingler kind of talking about the play that it happened on and where we might be going from here.
Yeah, he came out with some tightness in the left hamstring, obviously fouled that ball off down the right field line, kind of grimaced a little bit, and went out there and left hamstring tightened up on him. So right now, day to day, and we'll see over the next couple days how he responds. That was the first that he had told us was during that swing or whatever. I think the 2 at-bats before he had the infield hit, so he was getting down the line, and then didn't really think much of it on the double play ball. He let up a little bit, but he's been battling some bruised heels, things like that. So we didn't, think much of it, and he didn't say anything until that foul ball down the right field line. I don't know. Obviously, he came out of the game. You're hoping for the best, but I think with these hamstrings and soft tissue, you don't really know. You don't really know until the next couple days and see how he responds. So I don't want to speculate or anything like that. It would just be a guess at this point.
And again, you don't want to speculate, but of course, like he's saying, with a soft tissue kind of injury like that, you want to be sure, you want to know what you're dealing with before you get too deep into it. The Twins do benefit. Like I said, they don't have a whole lot to play for anymore. They're probably not gunning for one of those top 2 seeds, but they are almost certainly going to win the AL Central. Like I said, up 8 with 10 to play. Just have to win a few more times to clinch that, and they can do that fairly easily here in the next few days, I would imagine. So it's less a matter of where they're going in the next 10 days, but where they're going in early October. They need Royce Lewis, need him to get back. So we'll be monitoring that very closely down the stretch here. Now, the other thing we're going to be monitoring down the stretch very closely is who is going to pitch in that third game of the wild card series, or could potentially be, if they win the first 2, we presume Pablo Lopez and Sonny Gray are going to start the first 2. I don't think that's in question right now. If it goes to a deciding game 3 in that wild card round, who would start the game? Or, like I said, who would start game 1 probably of the next round of that division series, if that's where we get to? Could change a little bit based on matchups, things like that, but Kenta Maeda making a bid that it should be him. He's got a lot of postseason experience through 5 shutout innings against a good Reds team on Tuesday, making his case that it should be him. You've still got Joe Ryan battling for that, although he was roughed up a little bit on Monday. You've got Bailey Ober in that conversation, although he faltered a little bit down the stretch, got sent down to St. Paul to kind of straighten himself out, take a little break, things like that. I don't think it's Dallas Keuchel, even though he's given them a little bit here when he's been subbing in for these other guys down the stretch. It's just an interesting question. The Twins have been, it's a little bit of a luxury because I don't think you can really go wrong with any of those first 3 guys I mentioned. They've had a good, strong rotation this season, and they definitely have the top 2 guys set for what they want to do. I'm just curious to see what their line of thinking is as they think about who their Game 3 starter might be. Do they want the experience and the savvy of Maeda, even though his stuff maybe isn't as good as some of those other guys? Do they give it to Ryan and say, hey, you're our future. You're our guy. You've had a really good year, except for when you were injured and then tried to pitch through that groin strain, things like that. Do they give it to Ober if he has some good outings down the stretch here? I don't know. I really don't know where they're headed with that. My gut tells me right now they could potentially lean towards Kenta Maeda just because of his experience, because they know what they would be getting, and then could kind of back him up with some of those other guys in the bullpen. But it's an interesting question. Don't even know if we're going to get to answer that question. It kind of depends on how the series goes. But that is something we are watching down the stretch, and some of it could be influenced, like I said, by how these guys perform in these final 10 games.
Grand Casino would like to take a moment and salute the true football fan. The passion, the hope, the anticipation, that incomparable feeling of winning. Grand Casino would also like to take a moment to remind you that you can find all that anticipation, thrill, and winning at Grand Casino. Grand Casino, let your story begin.
Let's talk Lynx today on Daily Delivery, and no better person to do that than Kent Youngblood of the Star Tribune. Does a fantastic job and has for a long time covering the WNBA and the Lynx specifically. Kent, how are you?
Good. How are you, sir?
I am good, thank you. I got to be honest, I didn't think that I would be talking to you this week, at least not about the Lynx. So we could have talked about any other number of things just casually, but I didn't think that there would be a Game 3 in this playoff series against Connecticut, not with kind of the lead up to the end of the regular season where they lose their final 2 regular season games. Cheryl Reeve, their head coach and president of basketball operations, gets after them pretty good, I would say, and critiques their willingness to listen to the game plan and kind of where they are going into the playoffs after that bad regular season loss. And then they lose game 1 by 30 in Connecticut, and you're like, okay, they've packed it in. Connecticut just has to win one more home game, and it's over. And the Lynx go and win, Saturday, right? They win Saturday, force this game 3 on Wednesday back at Target Center. And now they're in a spot, Kent, where if they can win a home game, and granted, like we were talking about, like you were telling me before we started recording, they have not been a great home team. They've actually been a better road team this year, but what a massive advantage now if you can take advantage of your home court. You can win a playoff series that 4 days ago looked like no business being this competitive.
Yeah, you're right. The second game was Sunday, by the way. But
Sunday,
anyway,
my bad. Sorry, my bad.
Well, actually, interestingly enough, the Lynx are the first team in league history to lose a game by 30 points and then go and win the next game in a playoff series.
Wow.
It's never happened before. So, and it was interestingly enough, when you think about the history of how great the Lynx were throughout the years,
Yeah.
it's the first time in Lynx playoff history that two players have scored 25 points or more in the same game.
That blows my mind. Like, I can't believe that.
Well, the only explanation I can give is that they had so many good players. No two had to do everything. But,
Sure.
And I think they're the fifth or sixth. McBride and Collier are the fifth or sixth go 25 plus and 8 plus in the same game. So, in order for them to win against better opponents, they have to play kind of perfectly. They beat Connecticut in Connecticut earlier this year with Collier hurt.
Right, I remember that.
Because they played good defense. But I think the margin of error for the Lynx is so small that if any little thing goes wrong, things go sideways very quickly. So can they produce two essentially near perfect defensive efforts? I don't know. I think that Bonner and Thomas are going to get theirs, but the difference between the first game and the second was that all the sporting cast scored like crazy, especially from 3 for Connecticut in the first game, and did nothing in the second.
So with that in mind, with that as a backdrop, as I kind of referenced already, Reeve gets after them after that loss at the end of the regular season. They would have been able to play Dallas in the first round, and not an easy matchup, but I would say much more favorable matchup. Dallas not probably in the same class as Connecticut. I think maybe Vegas and New York maybe separated themselves a little bit at the end of the year as a top 2, but there was a top 3 in the league all year, and Connecticut was in that mix. And then you thought as they were going down the stretch, if the Lynx could get at least that 5 seed, they had a chance in the playoffs, right? So that's probably part of the reason why Cheryl Reeve was so upset with the way they finished the season. The loss to Indiana again blew a chance to have that. But in your mind, what precipitated that? Was she trying to light a fire? Was she just that mad that she couldn't contain herself? Bring me back to that kind of started this journey that we're on right now.
Well, I mean, Cheryl's never been one to hide her frustrations after a loss.
That is true.
I mean, I think Royce got a good bit of glee from that, and actually wrote about it, saying that the rest of the coaches in this market should be as honest.
He did.
But I mean, it was defensive execution. It was closing out on the perimeter. In both their last 2 regular season losses, they got killed from the perimeter. It was not making a team do one thing and allowing them to do anything, because I think both their last 2 games of the regular season, they were killed in the paint and from behind the arc. Sure. The help defense wasn't there. It's a little interesting that every time there's a loss, it's the players not following the coach's lead, and never maybe the game plan. But that's fine. But this team responds to that sort of thing. Maybe not immediately, because they didn't play particularly good defense in game 1, but that was a season opening game on the road in front of one of the better crowds in the league. That's not easy. You had two rookies making their first playoff start. Both rookies were a little bit more composed in the second game. I think that their back was against the wall, and they played good defense. When they play good defense, and they're not taking the ball out of the net, their offense is okay. But in order to win, they have to play great defense, and their big 2 of McBride and Collier have to have really big games.
I think I might have sarcastically suggested that they should change the Lynx final regular season standings to say 19 times they listened to Cheryl Reeve and 21 times they didn't listen to Cheryl Reeve. But I was joking, but I was kind of on that track where it seemed like it was it was blaming the execution or blaming the fault not following the game plan more than anything else. But maybe she's right. I mean, she's been doing this for a long time. She's won 4 championships. We give her the benefit of the doubt to a certain degree. Now, is the disparity between how they played then in those games and game 1 and then winning game 2, is that the difference between them then heeding that message? Is it them getting that fire lit, or is it kind of what you spoke to a little while ago, where it's like if they play defense, if they can play a perfect game and find that within them, they can be really good. But if they don't, they look really bad, and there's just going to be nights where it's one or the other.
Well, I don't think there are very many games where the Lynx don't play hard. I think there's been a lot of games where they didn't play smart.
Okay.
And I think you can kind of tell that by how defensive possessions go. And I mean, if they're on their game and they're playing the pick and roll defensively correctly and they're helping each other correctly, they're closing out very nicely on threes. And when they're not, those threes are open. And again, in game 1, a lot of those threes were open. And in game 2, they weren't. So I think it's execution. I think when you have as young a team as this one is, there's going to be a lot of fluctuation in that sort of efficiency. But I don't think they've ever not. I don't think they haven't played. I don't think it's been a matter of them not playing hard. I think it's been a matter of them playing smart.
When they started 0-6, a lot of us, myself included, thought they might just be better off playing for 2024, playing for a draft pick, develop everybody. Hey, it's okay if wasn't your year. There's a lot of good players that are presumably going to be available. If you get a high pick, maybe you get that franchise player and things look better in 2024 and beyond to pair with players you already have, like Collier, like McBride. And they said, no, we're going to keep competing. They end up making the playoffs, and now here they are. Or were you, when they were 0-6, where were you at in terms of your thinking of A, where they would wind up, and B, kind of what their thinking on the season was?
Well, if you look at those first 6 games, they weren't getting blown out. You know, they were losing in some cases to good teams. But they were in the game. And this in a season that I think that Reed from the beginning has said was a developmental season. They were going to finally put the vestiges. Sill's gone. We're not going to try to plug gaps and try to get into the playoffs. We're going to play the young kids and we're going to develop, and wherever it goes, it goes. So having done that, I think there was always the intent to be competitive and to play as well as they could. I don't think it's in her DNA to intentionally lose games in order to get a draft pick. It's just, and even with the WNBA lottery rules, I think much more fair than the NBA's. There's no guarantee that even if you do tank, that you're going to wind up with those picks anyway. So they stuck with the kids. They played them. Kids developed pretty well. They came together as a team, I think, very, very tightly, and they play for each other. And maybe they were a 19-21 team. It's not like they, started 0-6 and then were unbeatable. But, they started 0-6 and then they went 19-15, right?
Yeah, and 19-13 until those last 2 losses. So, yes. I mean, they became a pretty good team in the middle of the season. And they've proven that Nafisa Collier is a superstar. I mean, she was clearly an MVP candidate this year. McBride has had a great season, and they're going to have quite a lot of room to upgrade the team via free agency next year, because I think the only people they have under contract are Collier, McBride, the 2 rookies, Shepard, and maybe one other player. So there's going to be a lot of money coming off the books. There's going to be a lot of flexibility. Now, she's going to have to get people to come here. She struck out at doing that last year. Right.
But I think it's easier to do that when you've shown that you can be a playoff team than it is if you're asking a veteran to join a 6-win operation.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Speaking of those rookies, I mean, Diamond Miller got a lot of the headlines as the number 2 overall pick, but their second round picks giving him a lot this year, especially in a league where second round picks don't often make that much of a contribution right away.
Kind of a history of second round success here. With
Yes.
Crystal Dangerfield, I think, drafted in the same spot as Dorka. I think she's been the more steady of the two.
Yeah.
She has done a great job of using her angles and defending in the post, and she's been a very steady rebounder, and she led the team in assists, I think, on Sunday. Very heady player, very calm, unflappable. When Miller really flashes, you can see the upside in the ceiling there. But boy, I think Dorka's been far steadier and more reliable game in and day out of the two rookies.
Do they only draft UConn players then? Seems like they do pretty well at that. And she likes UConn players, right?
Oh yeah. She thinks that UConn players come here ready to go, having been in big spots, coachable. I mean, if you can play for Gino, you can play for Cheryl.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're going to get a lot of the same stuff. No question they love UConn. I mean, Fee's UConn and Dorka's UConn and Crystal was UConn. They like you.
Couple more things. Now we, talked about what got them here, and obviously the big win on Sunday has put them in a position. I think you've alluded to this a little bit already, but now, home crowd on Wednesday probably in a little bit of the same spot that you and I are, probably surprised that there is this game after seeing how things had gone. What do you expect Wednesday? What should we expect Wednesday?
I think this might be a cliche, but I think the first 5 minutes are really going to tell the story of the game, because you know how, I mean, in any sport where the postseason is a series of games, there's such a swing of emotions one way to the next. I mean, the Lynx get blown out in game 1 and they come out and play like they did on Sunday. There's a lot of playoff experience on that Sun team, and we were in the finals last year. They've been past the first round the last 6 years. You can expect them to come in and play an A game. So in order for the Lynx to win, even with a raucous home crowd, they're going to have to play great defense. They're going to have to play it consistently. They're going to have to rebound, and they're going to have to not turn the ball over. They allowed 30 points and turnovers in the first game. I think only 6 the second. They only had 9 turnovers the whole game.
Okay.
So, I mean, you'll know, I think, right off the bat what kind of team the Suns are going to be.
Connecticut won't be surprised. I mean, I don't think they would take the Lynx lightly, but if you beat a team by 30 in the first game, I have to imagine there's an element of, hey, this team might just go away without having to do all the things you had to do. I'm sure I guess that's a way of saying I'm sure the Lynx have their attention if they didn't have their attention before.
Right. Well, there was a little bit of feistiness in that last game too. Alyssa Thomas and Diamond got into it at one point after Alyssa basically threw Miller to the floor, and Miller got up and chirped. I think that both teams are going to be ready for this one. I think it should be a good game.
Yeah, I think it's fun. I mean, they missed the playoffs in 22. They made it in 21, right? But they went out right away because it was a different format.
Yeah, they had the one game elimination still there in the first 2 rounds.
And 2020 they advanced, but that was COVID. That was the bubble. That was something entirely different. Like, I mean, in terms of an actual series, like they haven't played a game like this at Target Center for a while, right?
No, I mean, it's probably, well, if you consider that the last time they won a title was in Williams Arena.
A year they played.
It has been a long. Maybe
they played a lot of they played a lot of XL that year, didn't they?
Yeah, maybe Game 5 of 2016.
Yeah.
Neka Gumake put back with 1 second left or something.
Yeah. Well, they would.
I mean, in terms of, that's the last time they played an elimination game at home.
Yeah, that's right. Because 17 was. Did they win that one in 4? Was that what?
No, 17 we went 5. It was at Target, and then 17 was at Williams Arena.
Okay.
16 was at Target Center, and 15 was at Target Center.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, it should be fun. I mean, I think you're right. I think that it's maybe high house money is maybe the wrong term, and the gambling analogy maybe doesn't work, but I'm sure maybe they don't think of it that way. But in a season maybe where people didn't think they were even going to make the playoffs, to be in a spot where they could advance in the playoffs has to feel like it's pretty significant to them.
One last little nugget. Maya Moore and Caleb McBride are the only 2 Lynx players in history to hit 6 threes in a playoff game.
We'll see what's in store on Wednesday. Should be a good one. I'm surprised, but I'm glad. I like big games. We like big moments. It's fun to see them get this opportunity. And you know what? Who knows, right? They won Sunday. They can win Wednesday. That's why they roll it out there.
Exactly.
Appreciate it, Kent. We'll be following your coverage from Wednesday's game and setting it up along the way. And we'll talk to you again down the road.
All right. Thanks.
Always appreciate catching up on the Lynx with Kent Youngblood, one of the best in the business at covering the WNBA, and some good perspectives heading into this big game tonight at Target Center. Like I mentioned, like we talked about, it's an opportunity for this team, this franchise, to maybe have a surprise advancement in the playoffs here. I don't think anybody predicted at the start of the year, and certainly maybe at the start of this series, that they would be in this position with a chance to get to the next round of the playoffs. One of the bigger games that's going to be played since really their big run in their big dynasty in the 2010s. They had those 4 championship teams, the last one in 2017. Since then in the playoffs, they're 2-7 in playoff games. And, they're probably their best run, their best season came in the bubble in 2020. So, a chance to maybe, elevate things, to have Target Center raised to a level that they haven't been at for a while. So we will see where they get to in this game. But the opportunity to be there is a surprise from the start of the year, how things went, and from the finish of the year as well. Speaking of the finish, let's finish with the cooler. Let's talk a little bit about the Vikings, especially in the context of a lot of the things we just talked about with the Lynx. Now, I wrote on Tuesday about how, the Vikings are sitting here, they're 0-2. What happens if they lose this game Sunday? They are home underdogs, like Royce and I talked about yesterday, home underdogs to another winless team, the Chargers, which tells you a little bit about what people think of them, based somewhat on last year and them being a little bit of a mismatch in terms of how they played and what their record was, a 13-4 season, but a negative point differential last year and a quick exit in the playoffs. Came into this season with a lot of new players, a lot of question marks, wondering what this team would be. They haven't gotten blown out, but of course the disappointing Week 1 loss to Tampa Bay, losing to Philadelphia at Philadelphia, all the turnovers, all the fumbles, that is not likely to continue. But the other thing I've been thinking about is, well, a lot of the things that have been going well, those are not automatic to continue. Kirk Cousins has been very accurate with his passes so far, even if he's fumbled a few times. 2 really that were his fault, although both of them big hits on big pass rushes. Then the bizarre one with Ed Ingram that he was credited with the fumble on. He's going to throw some interceptions at some point. He's going to have a game where he's off target, doesn't play as well as he has. The defense isn't always going to make the stops it's made, things like that. So the things that have gone well, you can't count on those things to continue going well, even if they clean up this turnover battle. But the larger takeaway is this. I'm fixated right now on what if they lose? What if they get to 0-3? Feels like if they get to 0-3 after this game, it could have a cascading effect on the season. They could, decide, okay, 0-3, barely anybody in history makes it back from 0-3 to make the playoffs. I think one of the last 99 teams since 2002, I saw that in a Bill Barnwell story on ESPN earlier this week. 1 out of 99 rebounded from 0-3 to make the playoffs. And if it had been this 7-team in each conference format, only one other would have made it. So 2 in 99 chance, let's just say, of rebounding to make the postseason. Now, the Vikings probably still feel like they're a good team, but at 0-3, the odds would be very much stacked against them. Would that eventually give way to some trade deadline moves. Royce didn't think too much of that yesterday. The NFL is not a league where a lot of guys get dealt at the deadline. It's not like baseball or basketball or hockey where the trade deadline spurs action. And I get that, but the Vikings might be tempted to do that because A, they would know that they're, playing for the future. B, a lot of their best players are on one-year contracts, essentially Kirk Cousins, Danielle Hunter, guys like that. And C, they might be motivated to not necessarily win much the rest of the year. And if you have Kirk Cousins and Danielle Hunter on your roster still, you will be in a spot where you might win more than you necessarily want to because you are playing for a draft pick. So anyway, food for thought there. But the Lynx offer the counterweight to that, right? It's way too early to give up on a season at 0-2 and probably even at 0-3, even if the odds are stacked against you. The Lynx were 0-6. They're in the playoffs now. They took advantage of a kind of a down year a bit in the league, at least in the bottom part of the league, to rebound and be the number 6 seed out of 12 teams. Hey, if the Vikings were the 6th best team in the NFC, they would get in the playoffs. And guess what? Their division does not look very good. We've thought that for a while. We've seen that so far already. So we can't give up on this yet. And I'm certain that they're not giving up on this yet. They signed Dalton Reisner, the offensive guard, to kind of bolster that attack. That's just this week. We'll see how much he plays this week. But they're obviously not giving up on things right now. I don't think they would even be tempted to give up yet at 0-3. But would it have a cascading effect if they lost this game? I think it's quite possible that it could. If they win this game, on the other hand, it could have a cascading effect in the other direction. They start thinking, okay, we're 1-2. The season didn't quite start how we wanted it to, but plenty of time left to get back into it, especially in a weak division. So this Sunday's game feels like a very big one to me, maybe a bit of a crossroads for this team and by extension the franchise and the future direction of it. Maybe that's a little bit dramatic for this early in the season, but I really don't think so. That's what it feels like to me in this moment. That will do it for me today in this moment. Good stuff coming up tomorrow with Randy Johnson talking Gopher football. Probably got some Twins talk later this week and maybe some Wild talk next week. Gosh, they hit the ice on Thursday for the first time in kind of the start of training camp. They're starting preseason games just a few days after that. I love the NHL. It's like, drop the pucks, get out there, let's just go play the games. They don't need much of a warm-up. They just start playing these preseason games right away. Bless the NHL for doing that, but these seasons are converging. It is the season of convergence. Wolves season will be here before we know it. Twins playoffs, Vikings, Gophers, everything coming our way, so plenty to talk about in future shows. But that'll do it today. I'm Michael Rand, back at it again tomorrow.